Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
He is Dr. Austin Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, joining us here this morning. First up is your Regis Ramblers tonight. Carson Park taking on Fall Creek. You guys got the 1 seed. Close game for your final game against the Illinois team last week, too.
Yeah, that was a nail-biter, to say the least. So that one came down to a 2-point conversion. They scored a touchdown with 2 seconds left and decided to try to drive home with the win by going for 2, and we stuffed them. So that's the most exciting high school game I've been a part of. So it was great to come out with the win, and hopefully that projects us forward into the playoffs. But we have a tough matchup tonight against Fall Creek. So as always with playoffs, you play or go home. So.
Yeah, so it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, definitely the Division 6 bracket too. There's a lot of good teams. I'm looking at it here too. Not to look too far ahead, because I don't want you to do that, Coach. But it's
I don't even know who you're talking about.
but a lot of good teams in there too. So best of luck tonight to you and the boys at Carson Park.
Appreciate it.
Last night though, your Vikings falling a little bit short, but we appreciate you making things a little bit closer in the division, for us Packers fans. So
yeah, absolutely, excitement. That's what we're all. It's an entertainment industry, and that's what we're trying to provide.
I like that. So first of all, I got to ask. I don't know if you heard it earlier in the week, and it's been downplayed in that. But what was your first reaction if you did hear the rumor about the Vikings would like to get Matthew Stafford? Did you hear that?
I did hear that rumor. I mean. Well, Stafford sure looked good against us last night.
Yeah.
I think he's still got some fuel in the tank, but I just think at this point you have to leverage a lot for. I mean, how much does he have left in the tank? I think we've been spoiled by Brady. When he had that longevity, it's just such a rare thing. I don't think Rodgers is washed up, but I think we are seeing that maybe time is catching up with him, like almost every other quarterback in the history of the NFL. So. As you get guys who are a little longer in the tooth, you start wondering, is it worth investing a lot into that? Darnold, I think, has been playing well. He didn't have a bad game last night. Certainly our offense struggled a little bit outside of that first quarter where we looked sharp. But I think that it's a couple drop balls, a couple things could have definitely went different for us. So I personally am not ready to move on, and certainly trading for a guy like Stafford is going to take a lot of cap space. To me, I think we still have, hopefully, our future between Darnold and JJ, and I think we go with that for the time being, at least.
Mm-hmm. Last night, your team did suffer an injury. Christian Darrisaw was left the game, was walking with crutches Thursday night after suffering a left knee injury in the second quarter. Player running into his knee or hit his knee there. Obviously, is the big concern the ACL with that knee?
Yeah, so when you look at the injury, they obviously showed it a couple times in the highlights. I think at minimum you're looking at an MCL injury. You saw that hit kind of the back outside of the knee that pushes it in, so you're going to have a stress on the MCL. So best case scenario for us is going to be, Jordan Love, like a grade 2 MCL. And those hurt, right? People get up limping. Those can be a significant injury. Unfortunately, with that, you often do see an ACL with that mechanism. And so our hope is that the MRI is going to come back with good news. I'm sure he's getting it done this morning. So we'll probably know more by this afternoon. But ACL, it is possible it could be other injuries along with it. So you can have bony injuries. You can have meniscal injuries. So there's a number of different things that obviously the hope is it's going to be just an MCL alone. But clearly it was a significant injury. He was down, had to be helped up, limped off on crutches. So he has been an absolute stud at tackle for us, so that would be a huge loss. But unfortunately, injuries are part of the NFL, so you have to deal with them. And unfortunately, the guy who stepped up didn't seem to step up quite as much as we needed him, because he gave up a couple big pressures, including the quote-unquote sack to end the game. But it was, it is what it is. You got to step up, and we'll see how it goes.
That wasn't a face mask. What are you talking about, sir? I don't know what you're talking
about.
Yeah,
I didn't see it. With your eyes closed, you can't even see it.
There you go. I like that. I might use that phrase later on. Hey, I want to go back to Aiden Hutchinson. We talked about the injury now, but there was a report that said that if the Lions make it all the way to the Super Bowl, he could play in that game. And that's in February. Do you think that's a realistic possibility with the type of injury that he suffered?
Theoretically. So when I'm sure he got a rod. I guess I never saw the follow-up on that, but I would guarantee he got what's called the tibial rod. Depending on the fracture pattern, we do usually allow some weight bearing right off the bat. And so the bone should be getting good healing by, 6 to 8 weeks. 10 to 12 weeks, you should have solid bone formation where it can start really absorbing more impact. And so then you do the math out on that. You're looking at, into the new year. I guess it's possible. I mean, do I think it's likely? I don't, because not only do you have to get that recovery, but during that time, the leg isn't really in use. And so there's just a lot of building up you have to do to get back to, quote unquote, pro level form, which is what he'd have to be at. So unlikely, but theoretically possible. Yeah, it is. I mean, like we talked about, bones heal better than ligaments and tendons. So ironically, despite that being a gruesome injury, in some regards, you're like, all right, bone heals well. I mean, better than a really bad ankle ligament or knee ligament injury, I would say for sure. So even though it looks worse, recovery is more predictable, and certainly the timeline can be shorter.
With broken bones and such, I know Chris Godwin suffered a broken ankle in his previous game, and all reports are saying he's done for the season. He's going to be entering free agency. Given the position he plays of wide receiver, is there any long-term effects with that type of injury that he suffered?
Unfortunately, there can be. So ankles are highly variable. People use the term ankle fracture. We all do. But it's such a huge spectrum of injuries. So there can be like an isolated fibula fracture and mainly just soft tissue beyond that. You can have injuries that break into the joint. Certainly when the ankle dislocates, then you talk about shear injury to the cartilage, which can worsen the prognosis. So I would say we see some people bounce back very well. I mean, one that pops into mind from recent memory is Dak Prescott. I mean, he had a fracture dislocation. You remember his ankle was pointing in the wrong direction.
Yep.
I mean, he looks like he doesn't have any ankle issues at all, right? I mean, he's scrambling around, running. How well he throws the ball, it's a different story, but that's not his ankle. So I think if you look at it, he certainly could bounce back, even at the position he plays. But it could certainly be a career-ending injury. So, I mean, we see that. So I realize that's a wish-washy answer, but we see it go both ways. People bounce back great, people struggle. So it'll be interesting to see the injury pattern. They probably will never disclose that, but I mean, whoever treated him will have a much better idea. And then certainly for him and in his recovery, we'll see how it goes. But it could go well, it could struggle.
One game that was kind of intriguing leading up to this, but it'd be a little bit of a damper if he doesn't play. We got Commanders Bears. And it sounds like Jane Daniels won't play. He's been missing practice with what they're calling as a rib injury, and he left the game early last week with a rib injury. Is it when he potentially misses this game this week? Does that tell you if it's a broken rib, or is it just a pain tolerance thing? I know we've talked about rib injuries before in the past. What would cause him to potentially miss this game with that rib injury?
Yeah, I mean, it could be multifactorial. I mean, I think certainly if rib fractures or bad contusions, I mean, they're really almost the same thing. I mean, they can be the point where people have a hard time breathing, forget throwing a football. So if he's not able to actually throw a ball well, he can't play. But the concern for injury, I mean, if you do have a true fractured rib, there's the risk of being hit there and causing what's called a pneumothorax or a collapsed lung, AKA. I don't think that's super high risk, so most of the time we let people play through those if they're able to tolerate it. So I think it's going to be probably more likely a pain tolerance. Now, if you have multiple fractured ribs, then it's more of a safety issue, but I mean, they would certainly announce that. I mean, they've been a little more hush on it, so I doubt it was like 3-4 broken ribs. So if it's an isolated one or maybe even two, usually you just say, hey, how do you feel? Can you play? Can you play? Good. Go out there. And if not, then you're done. So that is an injury. Sometimes they will try, numb it as well. Mm-hmm. If you remember, was it Tyrod Taylor who had he has lung collapse from the injection?
Yeah.
That was a big whoopsie.
That's what started Justin Herbert's career, essentially.
Yes, it did. That's right. Yeah, that is crazy how that works. So yeah, I mean, sometimes we even try to numb those and let people get back out there, but I think it'll be, given the fact it's been multiple weeks now, I think they're just probably going to let him play and more like warm up. And if he can play, he can play. If he can't, he can't.
Would a quarterback, I know we've talked about it like with wide receivers and running backs, could they play with those Kevlar vests, or is that, because they have the throwing motion where that could limit them a little bit?
No, a lot of Kevlar vests, flak jackets we call them sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
No, quarterbacks are probably the most common position to wear those. So can it alter the throwing mechanics a little bit? Does it make them bulkier and harder to be nimble? Because obviously he can scramble some. I think yes to a certain degree, but I think if they're saying you at whatever percent he'd be at is better than our backup, then in the flak jacket doesn't hold back too much, then that is an option. But I mean, no matter what you wear, if you take a shot to a hurt rib, you're you're doubled over, no doubt about that. So it's something they'll have to keep a close eye on.
I want to go to the NBA world here quick as we wrap up things. What's a lot of the talking points in the NBA is Joel Embiid, and now the NBA is investigating how they're going about it. But the narrative is that he's not going to play any back-to-backs and trying to stay healthy and such. And I know we've talked about load management and how things have changed over the years. But I guess I'm kind of asking, what was your general thought, or what are your general thoughts when you hear that the potential Joel Embiid, who's one of the best players in the league, is getting paid like one of the best players in the league, but the team may want to not have him play back-to-backs, and you're talking maybe, 50 or 60 games this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Load management is a term that was introduced to the NBA, I don't know, a handful of years ago, and we're seeing more and more of it utilized. I mean, I think you always have to look at it. I mean, these big guys, especially when they've had injuries to the joints, I mean, if they play hard, sometimes the knee will ache and swell, and they can't play another game. So, I mean, I realize the other issue, and I know I jokingly said it earlier, it's in the entertainment industry. I mean, that professional sports are entertainment. So the fans are the people who keep it going, right? So we're the ones who are paying money for tickets. We're the ones who are, watching television that pay for the commercials. So it is an entertainment industry. And so when people aren't playing, it's not the best product. So fans get upset, and understandably. But on the flip side, I mean, these people are human beings, and if they can't play back-to-back games because of pain or discomfort, it makes it a significant challenge. And so when you look at these guys, especially coming off, and I know he didn't have a surgery this offseason, but he's had surgery on this knee before that's affecting him. I mean, is it a concern that he's going to re-injure it? I mean, I think at that point you have to look at that. And I mean, we do that with people in their daily lives. And I talk to people who have arthritis in their knee, and like, look, we need to start modifying activities. So at the end of the day, sometimes you have to look at doing that quote-unquote load management. And I mean, when you look at what they're able to do and perform, it's sometimes a situation where it's going to be, again, frustrating for the fan base, but it's what you have to do to keep them healthy. So it's either that, or they play back-to-back games, the knee swells, they can't play for 2 weeks, and then people are upset about that too. So I guess the real question is what happens when it comes to playoff time, and you want to start really, I know they don't do back-to-back playoff games, but it's going to be where it's like, look, you really can't miss a game. Is he going to be able to go then if they get to that point? So, question marks that do come up, but I think load management's here to stay. I don't think this is going to be a unique circumstance. I think you're going to see this utilized more and more with players. And I know the NBA is trying to crack down on it where it's been a little too frivolous, but I think you're going to see it, and certainly people have a history of injuries like Joel does.
And then I don't know if you kind of were following along a little bit with the Clippers, but I saw this morning that a former Clippers trainer is actually suing the team because he claims he was fired for voicing concerns over Kawhi Leonard's injuries. And, Kawhi Leonard's another guy who's been banged up over the last few years and not sure up there. And I know he had an ACL injury a couple years ago, and then the whole Olympics thing this summer where he was on the team but then was taken off the team because of knee issues and swelling and stuff. And does that kind of raise your concern? Maybe there's a cartilage issue, kind of like David Bakhtiari, if he's still dealing with that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, certainly persistent issues. It's highly suggestive of either the ACL graft maybe isn't doing so hot, or more likely a cartilage-based injury along with it. I mean, unfortunately, cartilage injuries are very common with ligament, in this case, ACL injuries. I did not see the lawsuit. That'd be interesting. I'll have to maybe read on that. It's an interesting situation when you have medical staff and athletes, and sometimes people feel like they're at odds with each other. It'll be interesting to see the grounds that guy's trying to sue over. But anyway, to that point, Kawhi's knee, certainly, he's clearly not been exactly the same, and he's done some load management as well with his knees. So you start looking at that and saying, all right, is this a guy that is going to have persistent issues? I mean, unfortunately, there's a laundry list of NFL, NBA, you name it, athletes that have had their careers cut short by injuries, and often cartilage-based injuries are the kiss of death for a joint because we just don't always have great solutions for them to get people back to participating at a super high elite level.
Just to wrap it up, when they said, Kawhi with the Olympics, and they said, he's got inflammation in his knee, is that basically the fluid is filling up in his knee?
Generally speaking, yeah. When we're talking about inflammation in this setting, it almost universally is effusions, or what we call fluid on the knee, which is a marker that the inside of the joint is not happy. Which, again, I mean, 9 times out of 10 in this situation, it's going to be a cartilage problem, and it can be relatively focal. It can be diffuse. It can be high grade, low grade. There's a lot of different things. So it's going to be something that, and they can over time calm down. So it's not like once you have that, it's like, well, now the knee's done for. But certainly it's not something you like to see. I mean, when I have one of my post-op patients come back after a knee reconstruction, one of the first things I assess is there fluid on the knee? And when the fluid's going away, that's a great sign. And when it's there, it's not necessarily a bad sign, but you like to see it go away. And when it's persisting, you start to say, okay, do we have something going on here?
Interesting stuff. He's Dr. Austin Crowe, Chippewa Valley Orthopedics and Sports Medicine. Good stuff as always every Friday morning. Best of luck to the boys tonight, sir, at Carson Park, 7 p.m. If anybody listening wants to go check out some high school playoff actions right in our backyard. Regis taking on Fall Creek over there. So best of luck, and hopefully we'll be talking with you soon again, bud.